Space, as it turns out, is not the great equalizer humanity had hoped for. No, space, or rather the vast galactic community that had been thriving in it for millennia before humans stumbled their way out of their solar system, is actually just high school with higher stakes and much more creative ways to be racist. The Galactic Concord, that grand experiment in multi-species governance, operated with all the fairness and impartiality of a beauty pageant judged by the contestants' parents. At the top of this celestial pecking order perched the Zaridian Ascendancy, a species whose evolutionary path apparently included developing both an exoskeleton and a superiority complex. The Zaridians' educational broadcasts would drone to freshly spacefaring civilizations, have guided galactic prosperity for 12,000 years through their benevolent leadership and technological innovation. What the broadcasts failed to mention was that the Zaridians' primary innovation was finding increasingly sophisticated ways to take credit for everyone else's work. Their tentacular appendages were less often found in laboratories than they were in other species' intellectual property rights. Humans, or lung bags, as the Zaridian diplomatic corps called them when translator devices were conveniently malfunctioning, rank somewhere between quaint curiosity and potential health hazard in the grand hierarchy. Human civilization had been permitted to join the Concord primarily because their planet happened to contain several rare minerals that the Zaridians hadn't yet figured out how to synthesize. The Galactic Concord's central hub housed thousands of species representatives in a massive structure that resembled what would happen if you asked an architect to design a snowflake while under the influence of psychedelic mushrooms. Hallways branched in geometrically impossible ways. Gravity shifted orientation without warning, and the bathrooms, well, the less said about trying to navigate multi-species sanitation facilities, the better. It was in this labyrinthine monument to bureaucratic excess that a human woman named Eliza Chen first realized just how stacked the cosmic deck truly was. Eliza hadn't come to the central hub with dreams of changing the galactic order. She'd simply wanted to continue her research into programmable matter. Specifically, her groundbreaking work on molecular-scale machines that could reconfigure materials at the atomic level. On Earth, she'd been hailed as a visionary. In the hub, she was assigned a workspace roughly the size of a broom closet and told to file her research updates in quintuplicate. The Zaridian Science Directorate had classified her work as Tier 7, Primitive Technological Pursuits of Limited Application, which was only slightly more prestigious than Tier 8, Amusing Attempts at Science by Pre-Sapient Species. "Dr. Chen," wheezed Director Vexer, his breathing apparatus making his speech sound like someone trying to talk through a vacuum cleaner. "Your presentation on these nano-machines was quaint. Reminds me of my first science project back in larval education." The assembled Zaridian Science Committee chittered in what passed for laughter among their kind. 7 pairs of compound eyes stared at her with that particular blend of condescension and boredom that seemed universal across species. However, Eliza responded, maintaining her composure with the practice of someone who'd navigated both MIT's doctoral program and Twitter, "My quaint nanomachines can restructure carbon at the molecular level with precision that exceeds current Concord technology by an order of magnitude." Director Vexer's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Theoretical capabilities always seem impressive on data slides, Dr. Chen. When you have actual results, perhaps we can allocate you additional resources. Until then," he gestured to her microscopic office space with one of his secondary limbs. What Eliza didn't mention, because you don't reveal your full hand to people who consider you somewhere between a pet and a potted plant in the intelligence hierarchy, was that her nanomachines weren't theoretical. She'd already developed functional prototypes, capable of transforming materials with atomic precision. But Concord regulations required all research to be approved and supervised by the appropriate Zaridian Directorate before proceeding to practical application. So Eliza smiled, nodded, and retreated to her broom closet laboratory, where she continued her work using equipment she'd smuggled from Earth inside hollowed-out coffee makers. and what appeared to be extraordinarily heavy shampoo bottles for 6 standard galactic months, roughly equivalent to 8 Earth months, or as the Zaridians measured it, 2 molting cycles and a courtship ritual. Eliza worked, submitted reports that downplayed her progress, and carefully mapped the hub's security systems. Her breakthrough came not in the lab, but in the hub's central cafeteria, where she regularly endured meals that nutrition officers insisted were adapted for human consumption, but tasted suspiciously like what would happen if you tried to make lasagna out of seaweed and battery acid. The human consumption adaptation process involves removing toxins, explained Glix, a 6-eyed maintenance technician from a gaseous planet in the Cygnus Arm. Unfortunately, for many species, taste is carried primarily in compounds that would dissolve your organs. That explains so much, Eliza muttered, poking at something that resembled blue cottage cheese but vibrated when touched. It was during this culinary abomination that she overheard 2 Zaridian officials at the next table. "Vexier wants the humans' research fast-tracked for appropriation," one chittered quietly. "Another discovery for his accolades collection?" the second responded. "Apparently, these nanomachines could revolutionize material science. The applications for military technology alone— well, let's just say the Directorate is interested. Wins the extraction schedule. End of the cycle. They'll claim safety violations, confiscate her research, and reassign her to waste management on the outer ring." Eliza continued eating her vibrating cheese as though she hadn't heard a thing, but inside, something hardened. She'd expected theft of her ideas. That was practically the Concord's business model when it came to non-Exaridian innovation. But not quite so blatantly, and not quite so soon. That night, she initiated her contingency plan. 3 days later, Director Vexior and a security team of 4 Drachmarie enforcers, reptilian quadrupeds whose evolutionary niche appeared to be bouncer, arrived at her laboratory. "Dr. Chen," Vexior announced with the false gravity of someone who had practiced looking solemn in a mirror, "we have received disturbing reports that your research violates containment protocols. I must insist you step aside while we secure potentially hazardous materials." Eliza, who had been expecting this visit, simply nodded. "Of course, Director. I wouldn't want to impede safety procedures." Vexior's mandibles twitched in what might have been surprise at her cooperation. "Yes. Well, good." He gestured to the Drachmarie, who began efficiently boxing up her equipment, samples, and data storage devices. "You'll be reassigned pending investigation," Vexior continued, gaining confidence as he realized she wasn't going to resist. "Quaternary waste reclamation has an opening." "Sewage treatment." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "How convenient that position opened just as my research reached a critical phase." "Coincidences do occur, Dr. Chen. The universe is vast and full of statistical anomalies." Vexior managed to sound both philosophical and smug simultaneously, a particular talent of bureaucrats across the galaxy. "Indeed it is," she agreed pleasantly. "In fact, you might call my research a study in quantum probability itself. Small changes creating cascading effects. Butterfly wings causing hurricanes, that sort of thing. Earth metaphors are lost on me, Dr. Chen. Not a metaphor, Director, more of a preview." By the time the security team finished confiscating her research, Eliza had been officially stripped of her credentials, laboratory access, and residential privileges in the scientific sector. She was escorted to a tiny habitation pod in the maintenance ring, given a work schedule for the waste reclamation facility, and effectively erased from the scientific community. Word spread quickly through the hub. The human scientist had been caught violating protocols. Some rumors suggested espionage, others implied incompetence. The Zaridian Information Network made certain that every significant research institution in conquered space received the news. Eliza Chen was a disgrace to her species and to science itself. Within a week, Director Vexior had presented Eliza's work, somewhat modified and significantly expanded upon by the Zaridian Science Directorate, as a breakthrough discovery in programmable matter. The presentation received commendations from the highest levels of the Concord government. Vexer was promoted to the High Science Council, where decisions about resource allocation for the entire Concord were made. And Eliza Chen processed sewage, invisible and forgotten, or so everyone thought. The thing about being relegated to waste management is that nobody watches you. Security cameras malfunction frequently due to the caustic environment. High-ranking officials wouldn't be caught dead visiting those sectors. It's the perfect place to disappear. It's also, as it happens, an excellent place to deploy an army of microscopic machines that feed on waste material and replicate themselves, according to very specific programming. Eliza hadn't been caught off guard by the Zaridians' theft. She'd anticipated it from the moment she arrived at the hub. What Vexer and his colleagues had stolen were incomplete prototypes, functional enough to be impressive, but missing crucial components that only she knew how to implement. More importantly, they lacked the ethical constraints she'd built into her actual working models. In her tiny habitation pod, surrounded by salvaged equipment that waste management workers ignored because nobody cared what happened in the literal armpit of the station, Eliza continued her real work. The nanomachines she released into the waste reclamation system were the product of years of refinement. Not the crude versions in her official research. These machines were smaller, smarter, and had a very specific set of instructions. Infiltrate, replicate, await activation. Each machine was barely larger than a virus, capable of drawing energy from organic waste and replicating itself using available materials. Each new generation could transmit its programming to the next, creating a constantly evolving network of artificial intelligence so distributed that no single scanning technology could detect it. And they spread. Oh, how they spread. Within a month, they had infiltrated every level of the hub through waste pipes, ventilation systems, and water recirculation. Another month, and they had reached the highest echelons of the Zaridian quarters, hiding in plain sight as dust particles too small to trigger biohazard alarm. All the while, Eliza processed sewage, keeping her head down, speaking only when spoken to, becoming exactly what the Zaridians expected, a broken human, put in her place. 6 months into her new life as waste management technician 3rd class, Eliza received her first automated report from her nanomachine network. The message appeared on a makeshift console she had assembled from discarded parts, displaying in simple text, "Infiltration complete. 98.7%. Critical systems access achieved. Waiting activation parameters." She smiled for the first time in half a year. "Time for Act 2, she murmured to herself. The first sign that something was amiss came in the form of small malfunctions throughout the hub. Nothing critical. A door that wouldn't open here, a climate control system that kept rooms slightly too cold there. Minor annoyances that maintenance attributed to aging infrastructure. When the Zaridian High Council chamber's gravity suddenly reversed during a crucial vote on resource allocation, however, people began to pay attention. "Sabotage," declared Security Chief Kevex, cousin to the now High Councilor Vexer. "We have dissident elements within the lower castes." Investigations turned up nothing. Security systems showed no unauthorized access. Physical inspections revealed no tampering. Yet the malfunctions continued, growing more frequent and more targeted. Somehow, only Zaridian officials seemed to be inconvenienced. Their private quarters would lose atmospheric regulation in the middle of sleep cycles. Their food synthesizers would produce meals with subtle but disgusting flavor alterations. Their communication devices would broadcast their private conversations to random public channels. The Zaridian leadership grew paranoid. Internal investigations led to accusations, which led to purges of suspected collaborators. The once unified ascendancy began fracturing under the pressure of an enemy they couldn't identify or counteract. Meanwhile, Eliza continued processing sewage, occasionally taking breaks to send new instructions to her ever-growing army of microscopic saboteurs. 3 months into what the hub's rumor mill had dubbed the Inconvenience Campaign, Eliza received an unexpected visitor in her habitation pod. "Dr. Chen," said Director, now High Counselor, "Vexior," his mandibles clicking nervously as he surveyed her humble quarters. "I hope you're finding your accommodations adequate?" Eliza looked up from the meal of processed protein that waste management workers were allotted, deliberately taking her time to acknowledge his presence. "High Counselor, what an unexpected honor. I'd offer you refreshment, but I'm afraid my worker rations aren't suited to Zarenian physiology." Vexor's compound eyes darted around the small space, perhaps looking for evidence, perhaps just uncomfortable being so close to waste processing. "I'll be direct, Dr. Chen. The hub is experiencing difficulties. Our technical teams are unable to identify the cause." "How unfortunate," Eliza replied, taking another bite of her protein cube. "Have you considered it might be karma?" "I'm unfamiliar with this technical term." "It's not technical. It's philosophical. The universe's way of balancing accounts." Vexior's breathing apparatus wheezed more rapidly, the Zaridian equivalent of an agitated sigh. "Dr. Chen, I am here to offer you reinstatement to the scientific division. Your expertise might prove valuable in addressing our current situation." Eliza put down her fork, giving Vexor her full attention. "Let me understand correctly. You stole my research, destroyed my reputation, condemned me to waste management, and now you want my help?" "The Concord operates on principles of shared knowledge," Vexor replied stiffly. "Your work was repurposed for the greater good. The greater good of your career, certainly. Regardless of past misunderstandings, your skills are needed. You will be fully reinstated with appropriate accommodations." Eliza pretended to consider the offer, watching Vexor's mandibles twitch anxiously. "And if I decline?" "That would be unfortunate. Some on the council suspect human involvement in our current difficulties. Without your cooperation, those suspicions might gain traction." "Threats now? How very diplomatic of you." Eliza stood up slowly. "You know what I find interesting, High Counselor? You came yourself. Not a subordinate, not a security team. You—" Vexor's exoskeleton seemed to stiffen. "The matter is sensitive. The matter is desperate," Eliza corrected. "You're not here because you value my expertise. You're here because you've tried everything else." She walked to her small viewport, a tiny window that looked out onto the vast structure of the hub, lights flickering in sections where her nanomachines were currently wreaking havoc with the power grid. "Tell me, High Counselor, do you know what happens to dust when it accumulates in the right conditions, with the right electrical charge, and the right atmospheric composition?" "I fail to see the relevance." "It becomes a storm," Eliza continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "Tiny particles, individually harmless, combining into something that can strip the paint off a spacecraft or bury an entire settlement. Dust storms on Mars can cover the entire planet." She turned back to face him. "You beat me into dust, Vexor. You and your precious ascendancy, you ground me down until I was invisible, forgettable, just another particle to be filtered out of your exalted atmosphere." Understanding dawned in Vexor's compound eyes. "The nanomachines, you completed them." "Completed them? I perfected them. The versions you stole were toys compared to what I've achieved. You're responsible for the malfunctions." "Malfunctions? No. Eliza laughed, a genuine relaxed sound that seemed to disturb Vexor more than anger would have. "Everything is functioning exactly as designed. Your security systems, your communication network, your life support. They're all operating under new management now. This is treason against the conquered." "No, this is consequences. There's a difference." Eliza tapped a small device on her wrist, and instantly the lights in her habitation pod changed color, shifting to a soft blue. "Right now, my nanomachines have complete control of every system in the hub. They could shut down life support to the Zaridian sectors. They could lock all of you in your quarters and vent the atmosphere. They could send the entire station into a death spiral toward the nearest sun." Vexor's breathing grew rapid and shallow. What do you want? Justice would be nice, but I'll settle for revolution. Eliza gestured to her wrist device again, and the wall panel in her quarters transformed into a display screen, showing cascading code. In approximately 1 hour, every system in the hub will transmit a complete data package to every major world in conquered space. The package includes evidence of every act of intellectual theft the Xerian Ascendancy has committed over the past century. That's classified information. Not anymore. Also included financial records showing resource manipulation, transcripts of council meetings planning deliberate suppression of non-Exardian advancement, and my personal favorite, detailed logs of how my research was stolen, with timestamps and your personal authorization codes. Vexier's exoskeleton seemed to shrink in on itself. You would destabilize the entire Concord for personal revenge? Not revenge. Correction. Eliza's voice hardened. The Concord was founded on principles of cooperation and shared advancement. Your species corrupted it into a tool for maintaining your dominance. I'm simply restoring balance. She walked closer to Vexer, noting with satisfaction how he backed away slightly. Here's what happens next. The Zaredian representatives will announce their withdrawal from leadership positions. A new council will be formed with equal representation from all member species. Research and resources will be shared according to the original Concord Charter. Or my little dust storm turns into a hurricane. Eliza smiled pleasantly. Those nanomachines you've been breathing for the past 6 months? They can reconstruct matter at the atomic level, including the matter inside your respiratory system. Vexier's mandibles clicked rapidly in distress. You would commit genocide? I've programmed very specific ethical constraints into my creations. They won't kill, but they can make life extremely uncomfortable. Imagine perpetual molting, forever, across your entire species. The High Counselor stood silently for a long moment, compound eyes fixed on Eliza's face, perhaps searching for signs of bluffing. Finding none, his posture changed, shoulders slumping in defeat. The Ascendancy will never agree to surrender power, he said finally. Then I suggest you be very persuasive in the emergency session you're about to call. Eliza gestured to her door. You have 56 minutes remaining. The transition of power was not smooth, but it was comprehensive. The data package was released as promised, not to the public, but to a specially convened emergency assembly of all Concord representatives. The evidence was irrefutable, the implications devastating. The Zaredian Ascendancy, faced with the combined outrage of every species they had manipulated and stolen from for centuries, had little choice but to accept the terms presented to them. A new council formed, with rotating leadership and transparent oversight. Resource allocation was restructured based on need rather than political influence. And most significantly, scientific research became truly collaborative, with credit and benefits shared among all contributors. As for Eliza Chen, she declined offers of leadership positions and accolades. Instead, she established an independent research institute dedicated to ethical applications of nanotechnology, with branches on multiple worlds, including Earth. The nanomachines themselves were gradually removed from critical systems as new safeguards were put in place, though rumors persisted that some remained, scattered throughout conquered space like invisible sentinels, waiting and watching. 1 year after what historians would later call the Dust Revolution, Eliza stood in her new laboratory on the redesigned hub, looking out at the stars through a viewport considerably larger than the one in her former waste management quarters. Dr. Chen, called a voice from the doorway, a young Zaredian researcher, one of several who had joined her institute in the spirit of the new cooperation. The High Council has approved your proposal for the Interspecies Medical Research Initiative. Thank you, Talek, she replied, turning from the viewport. And how are you finding the experience of working under human supervision? The young Zaredian's mandibles clicked in what Eliza had come to recognize as their version of a self-deprecating smile. Enlightening, though I'm still adjusting to your species' obsession with coffee breaks. Cultural exchange at its finest, Eliza laughed, We get your advanced mathematical models, you get our caffeine addiction. As Talek left to prepare the research briefing, Eliza turned back to the stars, remembering the tiny habitation pod where she had planned a revolution, with nothing but discarded parts, and the dust they had reduced her to. The universe, as it turned out, had a poetic sense of justice after all. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to someone is exactly what they ask for. Make them invisible. Reduce them to nothing. Stop seeing them as a threat. Because dust gets everywhere. It works its way into the most sophisticated machinery. It finds every crack and crevice. It's patient and persistent and impossible to completely eradicate. And when enough dust particles gather together, moving with purpose and direction, that's when emperors choke, systems fail, and worlds change. Not with conquering armies or devastating weapons, but with the smallest of things, once beaten down, rising up together to create a storm that reshapes the very foundations of the galaxy. In the years that followed, the story of the human who brought down an empire with dust became something of a legend throughout the Concord. Some species embellished it to mythic proportions, claiming she could transform into nanomachines herself, or that she could speak to technology with her mind. Others dismissed it as propaganda designed to justify the new order. The truth, as is often the case, lay somewhere in between the myth and the denial. What mattered wasn't the specifics of how one human had outmaneuvered an entire civilization of supposed superiors. What mattered was the lesson that echoed across 1,000 worlds. Underestimate at your peril. The Zaridians, to their credit, adapted better than anyone had expected. Stripped of their artificial advantages, they discovered talents they hadn't known they possessed. When you can't steal innovation, you're forced to innovate yourself. Within a generation, they had carved out a new identity as master metallurgists, their natural affinity for understanding complex structures finally directed toward creation, rather than appropriation. Provided that they still retain. As for humanity, well, the galaxy learned what Earth had known for millennia. Humans are remarkably durable. Beat them down, they become particles. Particles gather. And what was that old Earth saying? Ah, yes. From dust we came, and to dust we return. The universe just never specified what that dust might do in between. 2 decades after the Dust Revolution, the Galactic Concord celebrated its first truly collaborative achievement, a unified defense system that protected all member worlds equally. The celebration, held in the grand atrium of the redesigned hub, brought together representatives from every species. At the center of it all stood the architect of this new era, now silver-hable but no less sharp, observing with quiet satisfaction the fruits of a seed planted in humiliation and nurtured in sewage pipes. "They say revenge is best served cold," remarked an aged Zaridian ambassador, approaching her with the careful respect one affords a natural disaster that has chosen, for the moment, not to destroy you. "But you went beyond revenge, didn't you?" She smiled, watching species that once couldn't share the same room now exchanging knowledge freely. "Revenge is short-sighted. I wanted something sustainable. You fundamentally altered civilization across 12,000 star systems. All I did was remove an obstruction. The rest happened naturally." The Xaridian clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. "We believed ourselves superior, you know. Genuinely believed it." "That's the thing about superiority," she replied, raising her glass to the stars visible through the atrium's transparent dome. "The truly superior don't need to announce it. They demonstrate it when pushed beyond endurance. The greatest joke in all of it? The Azaridians now voluntarily called themselves the Ascended, rather than the Ascendancy. A subtle linguistic shift acknowledging a journey completed, rather than an inherent right to rule. Dust to dust, indeed, but with one hell of a storm in between.